All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jessie Ransom, and I'm the Teaching and Learning Product Specialist for Ex Libris. And today we'll be looking at an overview of the digitization and copyright options that are available with Leganto. I want to stress the overview part of this because there's actually quite a bit. Those of you who have looked into this already know, but there are a number of different options that are available, primarily related to copyright, but the digitization workflows are very closely tied to that. So that's why I have this combined into into one session here around these two topics. But there is quite a bit. So what I want to focus on today are all of the different options that are available with Alma or with Leganto, and what that means to be using one option versus another option. I want to also just stress that copyright varies really significantly from one region to another, and even within a region, libraries handle copyright differently. So because of that, I really want to focus on just pointing out the options that are available. It will be up to you to decide how you want to handle some of these options. So there are a few things that we won't be covering in this session. I want to be very clear about this from the beginning, just so you don't sit through the next hour hoping for something. I won't be talking about the integrations that we have with different regional copyright agencies. We will share the slides, as Ray said, after the session. So the slides include links to more information about the different copyright agencies, but I won't really be talking about that today. And the other thing that I won't be doing is telling you what to do. I am definitely not a copyright lawyer. I know that's probably shocking to some of you, but I won't be, giving you any ideas about what you should do, what you have to do. I really want to focus on what the product can do and how this can help you. So with that, this is what we will be covering today. I'll do, as I said, an overview of the different configuration options that are available related to copyright and how this ties into the digitization workflows. I will talk about, what you can do with these configurations. Like I said, what it means to use this configuration option versus another one. So you'll have that information. The slides point to a lot of additional links. So we'll share the slides with you after the session so you can dig into any of these aspects in more details. And then we do have time for a Q&A today. I will pause throughout and kind of monitor the chat. So don't feel like you have to wait till the end to put your questions in the chat, but we will also have time at the end for questions. So the first piece that you need to think about is this question here. What do you want to do, or what does your institution need to do related to copyright? So this is really the first piece. This is the piece that I can't really help you with. You will need to know this. Some libraries really don't do anything with copyright, related to Leganto or course materials. Some libraries really do a lot related to copyright, and libraries obviously fall somewhere in between. So ultimately, this is up to you, and I think this is really the first step. So if you don't know this already, this is definitely something to start with. Leganto can help with a lot of different things that you might need to do from a copyright perspective. I'm saying copyright and digitization, again, tied closely together. So these are the types of things that Leganto can be configured to help you with. It can help you take a look at all of the citations and determine which ones actually require copyright review. It can help you track fair use or fair dealing decisions that are made by instructors. If instructors are the ones who say it's okay to use this resource, you can track that information. It can help you understand which resources need to be digitized for courses, to track copyright approval workflows for those digitization requests, process digitization requests, and there's more. Process and track the copyright approvals. You can also use Leganto to add copyright statements to scans and other course materials that you have in your Leganto reading lists. Again, we're not going to talk about this today, but I do want to point out that this exists. Leganto can help you process copyright licensing through an external agency. And then the last one is manage the copyright auditing process. So these are actually all the things we're going to talk about today. So if you were wondering if this would be a full session, anyone who's sat in on any of my sessions ever probably knew it would be a full session, but now you have an idea of just how full this session is going to be. These are all the things that I will now talk about. So how do you actually do this? So here I want to focus on how you can take these things that you're trying to do and look at the different configuration options that are available, how you can use Leganto and Alma to help you do those things that you need to be able to do. It will be a lot of information, and I also know that it won't all be relevant for all of you because, again, it varies depending on what you're going to use. So a lot of the configuration options that I'm going to be talking about, you can use just one of them, you can use all of them. So there's some flexibility in terms of how you might combine these different configuration options to do the types of things that you need to be able to do. It will be a lot of information. There's a lot to cover here. The slides all include links to the documentation, so you can, once you figure out what you want to do with these, you can get back to more details about it. I'll also point out, I've already noticed this since I've been talking for the last few minutes, I will probably say Leganto and Alma interchangeably, so I apologize in advance for that. As you already know, all of the data is stored inside of Alma, all the configurations are inside of Alma, so technically you're doing most of this copyright work in Alma, but it's for your Leganto reading list and to help the work you're doing with Leganto. So just apologies in advance. I hope that doesn't turn out to be too confusing. Okay, so let's go now and actually look at some of these things. So the first thing that Leganto can help you with, as I said, is help you determine which citations actually require copyright approval. So for this, there is, surprise, surprise, a configuration menu where you can set the default copyright status for different types of citations as they are added to Leganto reading lists. You can set separate options based on different types of repository resources, digital, electronic, or physical, Cdi citations, non-repository citations, and brief citations. So what you can do with this configuration menu is say something like, we never need to worry about copyright if it is in our electronic repository. So that's just an example. So for those, you would be able to set a configuration or a copyright status of maybe not required or already approved. If you are allowed to use something, I don't know what the situations might be, but you can say, it's either already approved, it's not required, it is required. So maybe it's a non-repository citation and therefore copyright is required. So you want to flag those specifically. So you can use this to say what the default should be, what the default copyright status should be for different types of citations. I also note that you don't have to have a copyright status for citations. The default out of the box is not determined. You can keep them all as not determined or keep most of them as not determined. This is just a way to help you kind of filter to different types that might require it if this is helpful to you. So what you could do with this is then take a look at all the citations, because as they are added to Leganto lists, they'll automatically have this copyright status. So you could potentially then set up a workflow where you filter all of your citations. This example here, we have the default as not required. So looking at this isn't something that you need to worry about. Another way to think about this is to potentially leave all of them as the default of not determined and flagged just certain ones as required. So what you actually do with this will, of course, depend on the types of citations that you do need to review for copyright. Maybe you review all of them, and this isn't actually helpful, but this is one option with Leganto as a way to help you understand which resources actually do require that you do some sort of copyright check on them. The next piece and the next option is, or the next thing that you might need to be able to do, I guess, is to track the fair use or fair dealing decisions that your instructors are making. And this is quite common at institutions that didn't use a reading list tool before Leganto. This is where I really see this being helpful. If pre-Leganto instructors loaded their resources into the learning management system and it had nothing to do with the library, and you don't have the staff to, now all of a sudden take on the burden of copyright, this is an option. You can set it up so that when the instructor uploads a file, they have to make a copyright declaration. The text of that is fully customizable. So obviously you would choose options that make sense for your institution. This data then maps to information that you can see inside of Alma. So the copyright status here is coming from whatever they've selected. So what you can do with this is say, the instructor is the one who has to say that this is something we can use. And we can go in to Alma or look at the historical data and understand that the instructor is the one who made that declaration. You do have the option to mark citations as complete if the copyright status is either self-declared or fair use. So for example, if for uploaded files, you only want to review the ones, let me go back here, that they have specifically said they'd like help reviewing, you can have all of the other ones actually mark as complete when they select fair use or fair dealing or whatever you have here, complies with copyright, whatever your message is. So that is an option, but I just want to point out only for self-declared or fair use. Those are the only ones that will actually mark a citation as complete automatically. Let me just pause because I think I saw some questions come in the chat. So before we get too much further along, let me just take a look here. What is the difference between CDI and repository? Let me go back to these slides. This is a good question. So the repository citations, these are resources that are managed inside of Alma. So inside of Alma, you might have your physical items, you might have digital items. Electronic ones inside of Alma are generally ebooks. They're also journals and other types of resources as well, but primarily for Leganto's purposes, we're talking about ebooks that are managed inside of Alma. The CDI citations are the ones that are added from the discovery layer from either Primo or Summon. So articles, book chapters, anything that's indexed, sort of separately or in addition to your Alma repository would be a CDI citation. There's a little bit of potential confusion here around ebooks because ebooks are indexed or potentially managed inside of Alma and also indexed in the Central Discovery Index, that's CDI Central Discovery Index. So ebooks could potentially be listed as CDI citations or non-repository citations. If you're, let me see if I have a screenshot here. Yeah, here we can see it there. So when you're looking at the inventory types on a citation, these first three are repository, physical, electronic, and digital. Other would include CDI. It could also be uploaded files or websites. So you'll see the link resolver link if it is a CDI citation there. I hope that helps. Okay, let's see, where were we? So we are here. Okay, so now we are getting into sort of the big one. I bundled together a lot of the things that Leganto can be configured to help you with, because now I want to talk about the digitization and copyright rules in Alma. And this is pretty big. I have many slides about this. I actually flagged them all with this little blue usage digitization and copyright rules to sort of bundle them together for you when you have the slides after the fact. But there's a lot that you can do with the digitization and copyright rules. So this is a way to handle the copyright approval workflows, to handle digitization requests, and also really what you're doing here is setting the rules around how you are going to handle those two pieces, the digitization and the copyright rules table. So this is a way to automate, and I have to some extent the process of deciding whether the use of a resource complies with copyright, and really whether you can use it under fair use or fair dealing. So you can build rules that will check. Wait, you'll build the rules and then you can check citations against these rules. So as an example, you can say, if the instructor is using less than 10% of the work, then we can approve it automatically. If it is the first article from this journal and this issue for this course, we can approve it automatically. There's quite a bit more that you can do. These are just two, I think, pretty common examples. These rules can only look at the metadata of the citation, the metadata of the course, the history of how this specific resource has been used in this course or other courses. It can't look at things like, do they really need this image? Is it really helping with what the student is trying to learn in the course? It can't look at that sort of non-data driven type of information, but it can look at the data. So you can build out rules that will then be used to as part of the copyright approval workflows. The copyright approval workflows can be part of digitization, but you can also do copyright approval that isn't related to digitization. For example, if you already have the file or the instructor has already uploaded the file. So even though the table is called the digitization and copyright rules, you can have just copyright with no digitization as well. So when you have a citation, you can run a check against these rules to find the rule that applies. It's similar to some of the other rule engines in Alma. It starts at the top with the first rule. Alma will work its way down the list until it finds the right rule for whatever the situation may be. And this is just a screenshot of one of the rules. So as part of the rule, you set up your different input parameters. So we can say there must be dates when this resource is going to be available to students, and only within this date range. It is being used in a course. It is less than 10% of the total work. And it is specifically a course-related digitization. So if all of these rules apply to my specific citation, and in this case, my specific digitization request, this is the rule that Alma is going to use. And so that's the input parameters. Then down here below, what's going to happen when Alma does this? So if this is also part of a digitization workflow, the file will be sent as an attachment using the document delivery digitization method. And then down here, what will happen with the copyright? That it does require copyright approval is the checkbox here. And then the three options down here below, that the copyright approval can happen in parallel to the digitization workflow, meaning the copyright approval has to happen and the digitization has to happen, but they can happen in any order. The second one is that the copyright approval has to happen before the digitization can occur, or before the digitization workflow will be triggered, is basically what this is. Essentially you're not digitizing something until you've already determined that you can use it. So that's the second option. And then the third is that the copyright is automatically approved, which is what we have here. And then we can set an automatic or set an approval reason. So this is now in this situation where I am doing a digitization request for a course and there are dates associated with the use of this file, and it's less than 10% of the work. The copyright for this will be automatically approved. That's what's happening here. So this is an example of what you can do with these rules. They can get really quite complex. There's a number of different input parameter options here, so you can combine them together in lots of different ways depending on the types of things that you need to be able to track. So this is just what the table itself looks like, the copyright and digitization table, and it's used in several different workflows actually. So I'll go through now those different workflows where this digitization table is checked. The first one is when the instructor requests digitization. They can do this from the Leganto interface, specifically within the full view of the citation. In the request section, they can request a digitization. So once they do that, it will run a check against that rule, the copyright and digitization rules, to find the right rule that applies. So copyright approval might be required, or it might be automatically approved, depending on the rules that you've set up. The instructor will actually be able to see that in Leganto. They'll be able to see if the copyright was automatically approved or if it's in process. And it also sends it to actually 2 different task lists for the library. I'll talk about task lists in a little bit. So this is what is happening. Essentially, they're requesting the digitization. It checks against these rules. Depending on the rules, it sends it to you in your task lists. These are also used when the library requests digitization. So from the citation, if you go and place a digitization request, this will also check against these digitization and copyright rules. Same idea, that it may be automatically approved, the copyright may be automatically approved, or it might require that you manually approve it, and it goes to the task lists depending on what needs to happen there. These are also used, oh, nope, this isn't what I was thinking. Okay, so this is about the digitization workflow. So once you have this digitization request, whether it's coming from the instructor originally or from the library originally, what needs to happen here is that you digitize the file or you digitize the resource. As I said before, this can happen either, it has to happen after the copyright approval has happened, or it can happen in parallel to the copyright approval. In this case, there would be a task for the copyright approval and also a task that takes care of the digitization. So Alma will trigger this digitization workflow. Once the item is ready to be digitized, it goes to the pick from shelf list. Alma routes it to the appropriate department or desk where it's actually going to be scanned. You scan the item. Alma will attach the file to the citation. Most of the time, this will happen automatically. There are some exceptions where it can't happen automatically if there's already a file attached to the citation, for example. And in that case, it sends an email with the file, and then Alma takes care of routing it back. So this is the digitization workflow kind of after you've already set up whatever's going to happen from a copyright perspective. The file is actually scanned and attached to the citation. I have this in here partly because I want to point out that there's something new coming in October, which we are calling a short digitization workflow. I work with a lot of schools where the sort of Alma digitization workflow is very big. If I go back here, you pull it from the shelf, you route it to the right department, you scan it, you route it back, then you have to go to the citation. This works very well, especially if you have several different people who are working on this process, or it might happen over several different days. But when I worked in Course Reserved, I worked in a very small library. I was the person who looked at the reading list, pulled the book off the shelf, scanned the item, uploaded the file, marked the citation as complete. I wasn't using Alma, but the same idea. You mark the citation as complete, you reshelve the book. It was all me. And I basically did it like walking over to the stacks, then walking over to the scanner all at once. So this short digitization workflow is a way to help with if that is more like your situation related to digitization. Essentially what you'll be able to do is from the reading list, just see that there is a digitization request for this, walk over to the stacks and pull the item, or print the slip or whatever, and go pull it and scan the resource. And then right from the citation, you'll actually be able to navigate to the kind of last step of the digitization request and upload the file. So you'll be able to do all of this from the reading list without switching to different screens or kind of changing your desk inside of Alma, and then mark the citation as complete right from there. So this, it's still using the same digitization workflow. Technically, it's still using the same copyright approval processes. It's just kind of streamlining the number of screens that you need to click on to complete the digitization workflow. Obviously, there'll be more details about this with the October release, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that this is something that'll be coming soon. So this is how the digitization and copyright rules are used for digitization requests, either the instructor or the library places the digitization request. It checks against these copyright rules to either automatically approve the copyright or send it to your task list, which we'll talk about later. And then the file is scanned and attached to the citation. You can also use the digitization and copyright rules when you are not actually doing a digitization. And in this case, you would already have the file. So if the instructor already has a scan and they just attach it to the citation, or you, for whatever reason, already have the scan and just attach it to the citation, you can still run the copyright check, even if you're not actually doing the digitization. And this is similar. It can be done either by the instructor starting in Leganto or by the library starting in Alma. So in Leganto, this left screenshot here, this is the same request section, but you also have an option to ask for copyright clearance for the digital file. If you click on this, then it triggers this copyright engine. So it will run a check against the rules that you've set and either automatically approve it or not. I realized on this slide, this is the first time you can actually see a screenshot of what happens on the Alma side. So here we can see on the citation whether the copyright is automatically approved or not. So waiting for approval for this one, and also you can see why. So this is the name of the rule, the second piece, exceed copyright work percentage. That's actually the name of the rule which has been triggered. So this can be a really great way to help you, as the human looking at this, identify why this couldn't automatically be approved, exceeded copyright work percentage, or same article from same issue used in other course, or whatever it might be that is blocking this from automatically being approved. If you make that the name of your rule, then that's a nice way to get some additional information about what's going on here. You can also trigger the copyright check from the Alma side. So when you are on the Edit Citation screen, there's a Copyright Attributes tab, and there's a checkbox here. So out of the box, or by default, you don't actually see all this information on the screen here. You only see it once you check this Copyright Auditing Required checkbox. And that also will then run the check against the digitization and copyright rules. So that is another way to trigger this rule engine from a citation. So kind of summarizing here, once you set up the digitization and copyright rules, you can use it as part of digitization workflows, which are initiated by either the instructor or the library, or you can use it as part of simply copyright approval workflows initiated by the instructor or the library that don't require digitization. It's the same rule engine, but those are the different ways that you can trigger a check against these rules. I'm going to pause here. Let me just take a look. I saw a question come in the chat. Once a digitization request is fulfilled and sent to the patron, can you resend the file to the patron if they claim they never got the digitized file? This is a very good question, and a good distinction too, because what we're doing here is specifically a course-related digitization request. So the request to digitize the file comes from the reading list, either from the Leganto interface or from the Alma interface. We start with a citation. So this is different from a patron-initiated digitization request because it's specifically something that we're going to be using in a course. So what that means is that the end of the digitization workflow is that the file gets uploaded to the citation as opposed to sent to the patron. So in this case, you're not actually sending it to an individual, you're uploading it to the citation on the reading list where it will then be accessed by any of the students who are in the course. Yeah, great question. And I was recently asked if the copyright and digitizations table is used for course-related digitization and patron-driven digitization. There's probably a better name for that, but hopefully the distinction is clear. It's the same table. There are a couple of rule options that indicate that it's going to be used in a course. I don't know if I can remember them all off the top of my head, but one of them, there's one that's a request type, and the request type is course-related digitization. There's another one that I think is copyright related to course. So if you need to have different rules for your course related digitization, you can. And you might need to, if this is going to be used by the 100 students in the course, as opposed to the one student who's requesting it, you may need to have different rules. I don't know. But if you do need to, you can use that rule engine to set up different rules. So again, all of the rules that all of the input parameters that you set have to apply. So it may be less than 10% of the work, but it's, not for a course, and therefore a different rule is invoked. So there's a lot of flexibility with that table in terms of how you can set the rules. All right, I don't think I saw any more questions in the chat yet, but let me just take a look. Yeah, okay, so let's keep going. So that's how the rules are triggered. What do you do next? So here, I mentioned before that it goes into the task list. So now we can see what this actually looks like in the task list. It actually goes into two separate task lists if the copyright needs to be approved, depending on what's happening here, but there's duplicate data in these different task lists. So, you can work from either place. When the copyright request doesn't get automatically approved, then the status is that it is waiting for approval. So we have down here at the bottom, citations where the copyright status is waiting for approval. And then we also have an approval task list. So there is some overlap. I will go into the difference between them. So the first one that we'll look at is the citations where the copyright is waiting for approval. This is one of the many different citation task lists. This will show you all of the citations that have the copyright status of waiting for approval, which the top one here would come based on this automatic rule engine that I've been talking about. From here, you can see this within the context of the citation. We can see all the details of the citation. We can see, which reading list this is on, which course this is on, any other alerts related to this. So you have all of that contextual information. You potentially in this task list might have other things. It is possible to manually change the status to waiting for approval. I'll talk about that in a little bit. That doesn't use the digitization and copyright rules that I'm talking about now. So at this point, I'll just point out. So this is really all of the citations where the copyright is waiting for approval. On the other hand, the other task list is the digitization requests that are waiting for approval. So these are things waiting for copyright approval that may or may not be citations. So you would also have the patron-initiated digitization requests approvals in this task list also. So like I said, you could have this in both task lists, but also both task lists might have other things. So here we might see patron-initiated digitization requests in addition to citations where we have something that we're waiting for. It is possible to filter if you're looking only for the ones that are associated with a course. It does show you the course details, but it doesn't give you all of the context that we saw in the previous screen, the full citation and is it marked as essential, which section is it used in, all of those different things. From here on the actions item, we can go in here and then work on the copyright approval. I want to point out that if you start from this screen here and you click on this link, it actually takes you to this table, just pre-filtered to the one that you're working on. So you end up coming to this screen either way. It's just a different starting point to get to it. And when you complete the task, you're completing it out of both task lists. There is only one copyright approval that needs to happen. You can just start from either place. You can start from the citation, or you can start specifically from the copyright approval task list. I'll just kind of pause. I feel like I'm sort of confusing myself here. I hope I'm not confusing all of you. I'll just give you a couple of examples. If you have a situation where you have, one copyright librarian who handles all of the copyright for all different types of requests, they may want to start in the copyright approval task list. On the other hand, if I specifically work on copyright approval for courses, I might want to start on the citations task list instead. You can start either place. It doesn't really matter. I think it's primarily about, maybe the role you play within the institution, but also how much data you want to have about the citation. But either place, once you start, you will, eventually end up approving it in the same way. So final words on the copyright and digitization rules. I want to point out that there is a video that actually walks through the full workflow. So if you're feeling like your head is spinning a little bit after this, I recommend this video. It's from Knowledge Days 2020, but there are two things that have changed since then. So I have a note of this as well, but otherwise it's still very relevant. It's still exactly the same. The presenter for this, shows the configuration rules, looks at some configuration rules, initiates a digitization request, walks through the full digitization workflow, so you can really see what this looks like. I don't think the first one for sure, you used to have to come in at the end of the digitization workflow and manually attach a citation or attach the file to the citation. As I said, most of the time this happens automatically now. So that is one difference. I don't think that she talks about the second one here, but this is another thing that has happened in the last 6 months, kind of related to this, is that if you change details about the course, for example, you're actually using this reading list for a different course, or you want to use it for 2 courses, you need to recalculate the copyright in those situations, because when the copyright is approved, the idea is that it's approved for these specific dates for this number of students. So when you change that information, you need to recalculate the copyright. So there is now an option to do this. You used to just not be able to change the information. You now can change that course information and it will recalculate the copyrights for you. So they may need to be reapproved, or they may be automatically approved, depending again on the rules. Okay, I saw one more question in the chat. Let's take a look at this. Can you clarify the functional difference between the copyright status and the copyright approval list? Yes, I think so. Let me go back. So we're looking at some screenshots here. Here we go. So the copyright status is the status for this specific citation. It could be, as we see here, waiting for approval. It could be approved. It could be not determined, not required. Trying to think of some of the other options. Fair use, self-declared. This is the status of the copyright as of right now. It could be that it is already done. It could be that it's somewhere in the workflow. It could be that it doesn't require any sort of approval, but the status just stores that information. So we know, I can't think of another word besides status. We know the status of the copyright at any given moment for this specific citation. Let me take a look at this question again. The copyright approval list, we right now are filtered to all of the citations that have the copyright status of waiting for approval. So every citation has a copyright status. It might be just not determined if you're not doing anything with copyright, but every citation will have a copyright status. You can filter that list to just the ones that are in a specific status, such as waiting for approval. These are the ones that I need to work on. So these are the citations that now require an extra step. So I could have gotten to this list by just opening up all the citations and filtering by the copyright status, but there's also a dedicated task in the task list for these. And I think we can go back here again. So there's a dedicated task for the citations where the copyright is waiting for approval. It takes us to the citations pre-filtered to that specific copyright status. So that's what we're looking at here. This other copyright approval list will include probably most of these citations. but also potentially other ones that are not course related. So if you also have patron digitization requests where the copyright needs to be approved, they would show up in this other task list. So there's two different entry points depending on if you're only looking at citations or if you're only looking at, or you're looking at all of the copyright requests. There's two different entry points, but it is, as I said, the same task. So if I start here and complete a citation, complete the copyright approval, it also comes off of this other task list here, and vice versa. So you can start in either place. So the task lists here are actually the work that needs to happen, and the status is just kind of letting us know where we are in the process, whether it's approved, whether it's waiting for approval, whether we don't need to. Okay, I got a note that it was helpful, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you. Okay, so that's everything I think that I have related to the copyright and digitization rules. It is, I think, when you first start to look at it, intimidating. It has the potential to be a pretty complex table. And these rules have the potential to be pretty complex, but I will say they're also very, very powerful. You can do quite a lot with these rules. So if this is something that seems like it might be helpful, but a little bit scary, I recommend that you take a look at it, because I really do think that this is very helpful, this copyright and digitization rules. You can always start small. You can start with one rule. If you want to start with 10%, for example, start there. You can always add more rules. You can always change them. It's flexible in terms of how you might end up using this, but it is, I know I've spent like, I don't know, 12 slides on it or something like that. It is a big table that has a lot of workflow implications, but that's a good thing because it can also then give you a lot of help with your copyright approval process. I will say, even if most of your citations don't approve automatically, the workflow table is still very helpful because you can see the name of the rule that's used. If we go back here, so you could have a lot of rules that say waiting for approval and then why, basically. So it's also a nice way to kind of identify the details around the situation very quickly. Like, I know that this is available electronically. I know that this is more than 10% of the work. Whatever it is, whatever your rules are, this can just be helpful information to be able to see as you're doing this copyright approval. Okay, so now moving on, I do want to also address the fact that you can also approve copyright or manage the copyright what we call manually. And this is much simpler. I have one slide on this one. What you're doing here really is just me as a human being. I look at this, I can see very clearly that this is fine, and I change it to approved. It doesn't go through the check. It doesn't run it against the rules. It's just a simple way to kind of track what the copyright status is. The previous ones that I was talking about, once you're using the automated copyright rules, it stores all of the information as part of the copyright attributes tab for the citation. The historical data can be used for additional rules. Was it used in the past, for example? The student will only be able to see it within the visibility dates that are listed on that copyright attributes tab. There are basically other implications beyond just I, as this human, can scan through this list and see that the copyright is fine for this. So there's other implications when you're using what we call the automatic copyright approval or using those digitization and copyright rules. The manual is really just a simple way to track this. It doesn't then build out the copyright attributes tab. It doesn't lock access around the dates of the course. It's really meant to be used more for informational purposes only. I see this more as like lightweight copyright. You maybe scan through, maybe you mark a whole bunch of them as approved, maybe one of them you do a little bit more with, but it's much simpler. Also, again, not as powerful. So this is something to be aware of. At the end of this deck, I'll point out there is a training video a new training video just out in the last month, I think, that shows both of these workflows when you're on a citation, either the automatic or the manual one. So you can actually see both of these in action. So I'll share the link to that. All right, I hope you're still with me. We're sort of nearing the end of at least the very complicated stuff. In fact, we are at the end of the complicated stuff, I think, the more complicated stuff. So if you can think back to that first list that I shared of all of the things that Leganto can be configured to help you with, Leganto, you can use it to add copyright statements to the things that you scan, or really to any of the course materials. So what you would need to do to use this is, first of all, configure when the statement will appear. And this is primarily based on the type of citation. Do you want it to appear for uploaded files, for links, for digital files, for electronic resources, for all of them? Or do you only want it to appear when there is a copyright record, meaning you have previously used the copyright and digitization workflows, and you have now a copyright record? So you first specify when this should appear, and then you configure the text, and this is fully configurable. I think the out of the box is a little bit strange for this, but you would configure the text that you want to have display, potentially change the title here as well, so you can change all of this information. And then when students click on the link, whether it's a link to a file or a link to a website or a link to an e-resource, this pops up before they can actually access the resource. So they have to, essentially read this, read it or look at it, and then choose to continue before they can actually access it. So this is something that you can do. It doesn't require anything else that I've talked about so far. If you only want to do this piece, you can only do this piece, or you can do it in conjunction with some of the other pieces. So this is something you can do with Leganto. I mentioned before that we do have integrations with different copyright licensing agencies. So if you are in the UK, if you're in the US and you use the CCC, if you're in Norway and you use bulk, there's just more information here. If you are not using, if you're in one of those regions and you're not using these agencies today, you may want to take a look at the documentation or the videos for them. They are really helpful integrations, for schools that do work with copyright. So I think it's at least worth noting that they exist. Not relevant for all regions though. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is that Leganto can help you manage the copyright auditing process, because there is now a lot of data in your system about what was used in courses, how it was used in courses, which pieces of the course was it used in, how many students, what were the dates. You have a lot of information. This is, again, that copyright attributes tab that I was talking about. So once you invoke those digitization and copyright rules, it will fill in this copyright attributes tab with information coming from various places. The number of students is coming from the course, the details about the pages that we're using, the dates out of the box, or by default, these are the dates of the course, but you can change them. Other information that might be on this tab. This is now in Alma, but it's also in analytics. So there is a dedicated folder within the course reserve subject area about copyright, and it has all of this information in that folder. So you can then run pretty complex reports depending on the data that you need about what was used in courses and the copyright information related to that. There are 2 out-of-the-box reports that you should be aware of, specifically in the UK and Australia, but I think that these reports are very relevant for institutions in other places as well, just as a starting point. So, they have already the fields related to the course, the reading list, the citation, and the copyright. So I think it's a good starting point for everybody if you need to be able to report on this. Obviously you can customize them, or you could create your own reports as well, but there is a lot of data that's available. So I did want to point that out. I'll also point out that I have a flag here uses digitization and copyright rules. But some of this information, quite a bit of this information is in analytics, even if you're not using the digitization and copyright rules. Obviously the details of the course, the details of the citation, the dates, the number of students, and also the copyright status. So you do have still, a lot of information for copyright reporting purposes, even if you're not using those digitization and copyright rules. Okay, one more. I suspect that you probably haven't watched 50 minutes about copyright if your plan is not to manage copyright at all, but I do want to point out that this is a possibility as well. So if you are not doing anything with copyright today and you only attended this session because you thought you had to start doing more with copyright now that you have Leganto, that's not the case. It is ultimately up to you, up to your library, how you're going to handle copyright. If you don't want to manage copyright at all, you can configure the system to do that, to not bring these to your attention in any way. Primarily here, we're talking about uploaded files. Everything else you can work with without having to do anything related to them. But if you want, you can configure the system basically so that uploaded files are automatically approved. That's really what we're talking about here. So you would use the file upload copyright options. Previously, when I talked about this, I talked about instructors being able to make a fair use or fair dealing declaration or ask the library for help. You can also use this a little bit differently so that it displays text. I was sort of coming up with sample text here, but displays text that instructors will see that essentially they're saying, it's okay to use this and the library is not going to be reviewing this in any way. And then you can have those citations automatically mark as complete. There is still a task in the task list for citations with uploaded files, but you don't actually need to do anything with them, for students to be able to access them or anything like that. So if, at the end of this session, you're sort of feeling more like this, that is also an option that you don't do anything with copyright inside of Alma. Technically speaking, that is fine as well. And here I am taking you to our additional useful links. There's a lot of them. Most of these links are to the documentation. There's links also you saw within the slides to different pieces of the documentation. This video here at the end is the one that I just mentioned, the newer training video that shows the automatic and the manual approval process. So you can see that information there. And then now we are at questions. So let me take a look at the chat again. I think I saw another question come in. In the meantime, feel free to add additional questions. So let's look at this. We are an art school and the faculty make use of films in classes. If a film goes into Leganto to be put into our LMS, will the item show up in Primo as a visible item to access? No, it won't. So anything that you add to a Leganto list, this is actually, you know what, let me open up Alma here. Anything that sorry, I'm gonna stop talking for a minute. Let me get logged in. And we'll just take a look here at some of the citations that I have in my demo site. This is a great question, and I keep saying that all these questions are great. It was sort of hard for me to anticipate the types of questions that might come up. So I'm very glad that you all are asking questions, because this is certainly relevant, from a copyright perspective. When you have a resource that's on a reading list, if it is, again, going back to the repository citations, physical, electronic, or digital, those can potentially display in Primo or Summon with the course flag on them. There's a visual indication that something is part of a course. Potentially it can be part of your course reserve scope with Primo. There's faceting options related to this. This is specifically your repository citations. So anything that's part of a reading list that is not And I'll also say that's an option. Those are configuration options. You don't have to have that at all. But anything that's not a repository citation, and this includes uploaded files, it includes links to websites, to films, if you're storing these films either in Alma or Leganto, or if you're storing them, on another platform, those will not be added to Primo. They're not, automatically indexed by Primo just because they're part of a reading list. They are only visible as part of that reading list, or only accessible as part of that reading list. You may also have them indexed in Primo. If this was an article, for example, it will still obviously be in Primo, but there won't be an indication that it's part of a reading list or it's part of a course. That's only true for the repository citations. From a copyright perspective, I hope this is reassuring. This means that only the people who have access to the reading list can actually access this resource. And you have control also over who has access to any reading list. So if we go back into this specific list, that's based on the publication status here. So, there's a number of different options. If you do need to lock down access to only the students who are enrolled in the course, there's a couple different ways to do that. Course students means that the student has to start in the learning management system to be able to access the resource. There's also one more here. Let's see, all students restricted means any student or anyone affiliated with the institution really, but any student can access the list, but you have to start in the learning management system to access the files. So there's some different options there. And let's see, last thing I wanted to say was, I said you have to start in the learning management system if you publish to course students. That's really the easiest way. It is also possible to load enrollment information into Alma about, which students are affiliated with which courses. So that's the other way around it. But if you are, let's say, uploading a file or uploading a video, whatever it may be, you don't have to worry that now all of a sudden everyone at your institution can access that file. As long as the list is published, depending on how the list is published, they will have to have access to the reading list itself to be able to access that specific file. All right, I don't see any more questions. I'll wait for just another minute, just in case somebody is typing. Ray, did you see any that I missed?
No, it looks like you got everything.
All right. Well, let me put my slide back up. My email address is on this last slide, so I'll put this up. I'll just finish by saying thank you so much for joining today. And if you've joined some of the other sessions as part of this series, thank you for joining those as well. Again, I hope it was helpful. If it wasn't helpful, please feel free to reach out to me. If you were hoping for different information about copyright, if there's something that you were always been wondering about that I didn't cover, feel free to reach out. We will share the recording and we will share the slides as well. And of course, the slides have links to a lot more information than what I've gone into today. So I think that's everything for today. I haven't seen any more questions come in, so I'll just say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Jessie, and thanks everybody for attending.